Kelly Shackelford, his team on the front lines. Kelly, welcome. I'm glad you're with us.
No, it's a privilege to be on, Dan.
Kelly, one of the things that is in the news and we're talking and hearing a lot about is the American Legion case, and it's being watched very, very closely. And I know your team is arguing this case at the Supreme Court, I think the end of this month, right?
February 27th.
February 27th. Tell us about the case and how important this is to our nation.
Well, this is a case about a Veterans Memorial that was put up almost 100 years ago by mothers who lost their sons in World War I and the American Legion. And it was to honor these 49 young men who died in World War I, of all races and backgrounds and just people who had died. And, of course, back then, you really couldn't fly. Most people couldn't certainly fly over to Europe to see the grave of their son. And so they put up this memorial in Prince George's County, which is Maryland, right outside of D.C., and it's a cross, and it says valor and courage, and it says the American Legion, and it was on American Legion land. And it sat there until 40 years later. This is outside of D.C., so they needed to build roads. So they, by eminent domain, they took the land, but they certainly were not going to disturb a Veterans Memorial. And so they built the road around the land, and so it's somewhat in the median. And then another 40 years or so later, the American atheists come forward and say, hey, wait, you can't have this cross on government property. And they filed a lawsuit. And we won at the district court. They said, we don't tear down veterans memorials because they have a cross or a religious symbol. We got to the Court of Appeals, and our judges were 2 Obama appointees and 1 Clinton appointee. And one of the Obama appointees said, if we just cut the arms off of the cross, won't that take care of all the problems? And so this was the mindset we were dealing with, and not surprisingly, the decision came down 2-1. The Clinton appointee, dissented and said, "There's nothing wrong with this Veterans Memorial. We don't tear down Veterans Memorials because they have a cross." And but he was outvoted, and so it was 2-1. It has now gone up to the Supreme Court, and one of the reasons is because this would be horrible just for these families. I mean, their descendants are there saying, "Don't you dare tear this down." But it would be bad for veterans memorials all over the country because every community of every state of this country has religious symbols in their cemeteries with the veterans memorials and these types of things. I mean, the bulldozing and sandblasting is beyond our wildest imagination of what is going to have to happen if this occurs. And as a great example, Dan, within the jurisdiction of this court that has already ruled is another cemetery. It's Arlington National Cemetery. If this is not overturned, they're going to have to go into Arlington and literally tear down the large freestanding crosses that are in Arlington Cemetery, the Cross of Sacrifice, the Argonne Cross, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier that says "Known but to God." It's just unfathomable, and that's sort of the obvious first step. And if you want, I can go further into what this case means for all kinds of issues because of sort of the test or the legal analysis and the fact that many people think now that we have 5 justices on the court who are more honed to following the Constitution, that they're actually going to maybe go back to the Constitution. So these silly attacks on veterans memorials, on displays around Christmas, all these things maybe can be stopped in the future because of the bad interpretations that have occurred in the past.
Well, Kelly, as I think about this, so I have 8 grandchildren under the age of 9. And to think there's just the mere thought that they're not going to be able to go to Arlington, that it could get that far. And I think about how important this is for our heritage as Americans. I can't even imagine, I shudder to think or imagine what this is going to lead to and what this is going to open up. That this atheist group could win this fight. Now, I know you're not here for this. You're here because I asked you to talk about a couple of these cases. But, this is why I'm just saying to all of our listeners, this is what we have as evangelical Christians, as American patriots. We have First Liberty. The others have ACLU and American atheist groups and so on and so forth. We have First Liberty. And, this is why we've got to fight. And one of the ways that we get into the fight is we support groups like this. I don't even want to sound a little bit, I'm just giving an example, but my wife and I believe it's really important that we support First Liberty, and we have for years, and we always will. And this is a Supreme Court argument, and I imagine, Kelly, that this is no easy task to prepare for, to have attorneys on hand, ready and fighting and preparing for this what could be very long and drawn out. But this is the end of the line. We can't go any further than this. Every I has to be dotted.
Yeah, and I would tell, if they want it, by the way, if anybody wants to go look at the case, support the case, all the info, they can just go to you spell it out, First Liberty, firstliberty.org, and they can do that. I look at this like this is a no-brainer getting involved with, because I really believe we're about to be a part of changing history. And that's what this case is. It's going to be a precedent that's going to be, in the law books now. I mean, who knows, 20, 30, 40 years, it might be the case everybody is following. And it's important not only because of the Veterans Memorial and what it means to our Veterans Memorials all over the country, but it's also important because why are we here? We're here because of some really bad tests that were created by past courts that are leading to these absurd results. They're trying to interpret the Establishment Clause. And what the founders were trying to do with the Establishment Clause is they didn't want there to be a national church, and they didn't want any of us supporting a national church. The idea that they brought all these terms in now that aren't a part of the Constitution, separation of church and state, and all these other things, and they've twisted them to where now the government is almost hostile to religion, the founders would be appalled at that. That's never what they intended by the Constitution. So what we did in our briefs, in fact, is we said to the court, these tests you got are unworkable. They lead to just absurd results, and they're certainly not what the founders and the Constitution says. Let's go back to what the Constitution says. And so if the government's not coercing someone with regard to the religion, there's nothing wrong with religion in public. Our founders are fine with that. That's freedom. And so if we succeed in that, we could really change the culture in a major way and get back to what our country was really about from the very beginning.
And that's why this is a case that is so critical to America, to our heritage, to the Constitution. And it's something that we have got to step up and get involved in. And I hope everybody listening will. And this reminds me of how you guys and your team how are you working to help make sure that we get judges on federal courts? These are lifetime appointees. Tell us about that.
Well, one of the things when our mantra or our mission is really advancing and religious freedom across the United States, and so we were preparing to do that for President Hillary Clinton before the election, and figuring out how we were going to do that under that administration. And when Trump got elected instead, we were surprised, and we said, all right, let's see what opportunities there are. We've seen a number, really incredible opportunities to advance religious freedom, but one of the biggest is judges. There were 120 judicial seats waiting to be filled when the president took office, and he had stated publicly that he wanted to really change this approach on judges and get back to the, people would say conservative, but I would just say judges who want to be judges and not politicians, who are going to constrain themselves to the Constitution, who are committed to doing that, and to really, putting life into the First Amendment and preserving and protecting that. And that's what he's done. And we've helped on making sure we analyze all these picks and that we give that information, that we make sure that the best First Amendment religious freedom judges are going on the court. And I've got to tell you, Dan, what we're seeing is beyond any. I can say obviously, I've never seen a quality of judges go onto the court that have been put on so far in the first 2 years. And there are now 160 seats waiting to be filled, and these are lifetime appointments. So every one of these people who go on, some of them are maybe 20, 30 years or more on the bench. This is who our grandkids are going to have as their judges. So you want to impact the long term on our freedoms and the Constitution, this is a really important matter. So we've done everything in our power to make sure that these judges are excellent, and I've got to say the administration has done a really good job. And everybody's seen it with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. I mean, Kavanaugh donated time with me on a religious liberty case 20 years ago. This is a guy who really cares about religious liberty. And so these are the kinds of people we're putting on the court. And again, I would tell people, if they go to firstliberty.org, one of the things we have right there on the front page is an analysis on what's going on with the judges. It shows them all the numbers, the seats that are open, who are being nominated, all that, so they can follow that if they want to.
Kelly, we appreciate so much what's going on. Firstliberty.org, first, F-I-R-S-T, spelled out, firstliberty.org. And Kelly, we appreciate it so much.